Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to have you join me today on a really exciting episode, a conversation with someone who has been on the show before. She's back again for a second time. I always love my conversations with Carissa, whether they're recorded like this or off the cuff because we've decided to get on the phone. And my guest today is Carissa. Give me the last name because I don't want to butcher it.
Burgett.
Burgett. Okay. Carissa
Just Burgett,
Burgett.
nothing fancy.
Nothing fancy. Okay. Carissa is joining us. We actually have an audience here with us today. We'll be doing a Q&A kind of towards the end, and I'm looking forward to going through all the wonderful questions we have. We're talking about something extremely important that is extremely big in the work that Exceptional Admins does for the admin community. And Carissa took my Building Your Personal Brand course, which is online. And we were emailing about it and we decided, let's have a conversation. So here we are. Carissa, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
You're welcome. Excited to be here. Excited to be
So many of those that are joining us here in this Zoom room, they know you, but the listeners may not. So give us some storytelling on where you've been at in your career, what leads you to what you're doing today, and how you're adding exceptional value inside your organization.
here. Thank you. I've been in the admin profession now for 10 plus years, and which really for a lot of us who've been in the profession, that's young. There's a lot of us who I know who've been in for 25, 30. I look up to a lot of the admins who've been, career admins and their path and their journey and really trying to learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've been in all sorts of different positions within the admin field, from a coordinator to an admin assistant to executive assistant to assistant to the president, to board administrator. I've worked in small family-run companies where there was four of us. I've worked in, Fortune 500 company, a larger scale company, and then I've also worked in nonprofit area. So really run the gamut on different fields within the admin profession that I've worked and enjoyed. 90% of it. There's always
That's
that
a good
percent of
percentage. Yeah, 90%. I love
I
that.
feel like I feel like I'm in the right career if I'm enjoying about 90% of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's hard to come by, but also being realistic. There's
Yeah.
highs and lows related to all of that and all those different type of organizations. There's plus and minuses across the board, but I'm really passionate about being an admin. For those of you that know me, a lot of you will talk to me about my passion and my drive for being an admin and getting the word out about how important this field of work is and how we are overutilized but undervalued a lot of the
Mm.
time, and how we really need to tune into ourselves and our achievements and building our brand. And so through the work with Halani on her building your personal brand platform, I took that course. It was great. I had a lot of big ideas leading into that course that I took, and it kind of was like the kick in the butt I needed to be like, okay, Carissa, because even though I have a lot of experience and I've done a lot of big things in my career, I still get scared and nervous, and I tend
Yeah.
to worry a lot about what people think. And so if I'm going to put myself out there and put my brand out there, I want to feel good about it, and I want it to be intentional.
Intentional is so key. And it's amazing. We think about a personal brand is hard to make that connection because, quote, a brand is more of a product. Nike, just do it, right? And these catchphrases, and you think of there's several fast food restaurants that compete against each other, yet each of you has something beautiful and unique to share. And each of you needs to hone in on what that is. And so I'm super excited. So that's right. You took the course, which was great. And I remember, I believe it was an email, was like, you got the extra energy and motivation, which for me is ultimately like my second favorite thing that I hear. Halani, you motivated me, or what you talked about motivated me, or the conversation you had on the show or through the courses that you have, it motivated me. And sometimes we need, to your point, like that little kick in the butt to just get a little bit of risk going, which I like to say risk reward, to like kind of just push you a little bit into the direction of that next thing you want to do that maybe you were holding yourself up from doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. And I tend to be a little, it's interesting. In certain parts of my life, I'm risk averse. Others, I'm like, let's just do it. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I don't care what the outcome is. And I find myself when it comes to branding, personal brand, it's also really personal, right? And
Yeah.
so I mean, that might sound silly, but it is. And when you're looking at what is it that you want people to see in you? What
Hmm.
is it, how do you want to be seen by, no matter what the audience is, whether it's, through your work or through your network or LinkedIn or whatever it is,
Hmm.
what is it that you want to capture and share about yourself? Because we are all, I talk a lot about our strengths as admins and individuals, and we all have purpose. And we all have things that we're really great at and things we're not, like
Yeah.
I'm not talking about math because guess what? I'm not really great at math. It
Neither
is
am
not,
I.
so, I'm not going to be on there talking about geometry because that is not
Right.
my strong suit. But I
Right.
will talk about the power of network and admin community and supporting each other. And so all of that is I've kind of found, I don't know if I call it my niche, but my people, for
Mm.
sure. And then
Well,
how
that's
can I
great.
give back to my community, which has a
Mhm.
lot to do with your personal brand. And that may not be for everyone, but that is something that I've really leaned into.
And I talk about this in the course, so I'm giving a little teaser. A brand is not a reputation, which is
Yep.
hard. And I explain it in greater detail. And I was just looking on my iPad for some of my notes. A, a reputation has to be defended. A
Hmm.
brand is how you have chosen to show up in the world. And this is also where it's a huge tangent, which we won't take, but there is an overlap of, well, I have to defend that people see me a certain way. This, and I know a lot of the IAAP audience for the admins out there know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just really wanting to rise that self-actualization at the top, which is in
Yep.
itself its own journey. In personal branding, that's a part of the work too. When you have the personal branding as this is how I present myself, this is how I hope, because this is what I believe about the work that I do, the value that I add, that you see that's about me too, which the reputation is defense, defense, defense. Like, this is what we do. This is exactly what we want to offer you. And then there's a lot that comes with that. So, just to point out here, personal branding is really you becoming beautiful and happy in your own, and knowing that that uniqueness is something to be celebrated, which I know, Carissa, which is why you love this, especially for the admin audience. Because if you have 10 resumes and they all say executive assistant ish for 10 ish years, who's different? Why? Now I could go on a tangent on that they all kind of look the same. So now it's like, ooh, what's the personal brand of this one and that one? What's the uniqueness of that one? Which is why the course was so important for me to put out there. In your opinion, here at the top, why is honing in and building your personal brand so important? So important.
I mean, it really helps to identify you as a person, and it has a lot to do, with leading with purpose,
Yeah.
and people are watching you. Like, I mean, this is a little silly, but I mean, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and she sees me, as her mom and as her friend, I hope. And
Yeah.
we spend a lot of time together. But she watches me do stuff for like the IAAP and other admin related things. And she sees me in my work, and she's been to a couple different events. And, she's always like, Mama, you're, polished, and you have this basically persona. She
This
doesn't say it in those words, but
essence,
yeah.
mom. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so, and that's amazing for me to be able to show her that she
Yeah.
can be multifaceted and different versions of herself. Doesn't mean that I'm fake in any of them. I
Mm.
just have different parts of me that I can bring out in different audiences, and be able to show her that you can be anybody you want to be. And so I really, on a personal level, find that important to be able to kind of engage with her on that level, and then also how I show myself out into the world. It reminds me, we also don't have to be perfect at everything.
Say that
There's that.
again.
We do not have to be perfect at everything. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself that a lot. And one thing that it does when you have a personal brand is it helps remind you that, maybe you have three key things that you really can lean into, that you feel
Hmm.
really, really confident. And how many times do we question ourselves in a day with what we're doing, or
Yeah.
projects we're taking on? And, if you feel strong in your personal brand, it makes it a lot easier, to do a lot of other things,
Yep.
and in reminding yourself that there's no such thing as perfection, but if you are going to be really, really good at things, why not pick two or three and then really lean into those? And that's what I've chosen to do, and figuring out kind of where my niche is in with the networking, and also within even my organization.
Mhm.
Where am I needed? Where can I add value, and where can I add value that's not just strictly professional in the admin role?
Mhm.
Can I help? I really enjoy events, and I do a lot of my own events for a board of directors. But can I help out at one of the events that we have for the organization where we're inviting members? How can I get myself out there in that way? And even for those that are introverts, that's nothing that they want to do. But is there a
Mhm.
way that maybe you can assist on the back end for a different type of project?
Mm.
Things are worth writing down as you do them, and then using them in your review, putting them on your resume, putting
Mhm.
yourself, showing the uniqueness of yourself, I think is and being able to highlight that in multiple ways is really important.
Yeah, and when I talk about personal branding at EA University, and then I took the piece of it to put through the course so anyone could take it at any time, it was so much about wanting them to know what you just said there with that uniqueness. And we do get, which is what her profession and the family of admins, we do get slightly complacent in, well, I do calendar management, I do expense reports, I do travel, and we have this common vocabulary, which I think is great. Like a yoga person has vocabulary with their people that do yoga, the individuals who are cyclists, they have common vocabulary. But what makes you unique? And so you talked about what it is, those maybe top three strengths. We love to articulate out into the community for admins. What is your suite of strengths? Google Suite has a suite of products, right? Microsoft suite of application tools. It's the same application in the world of what are your suite of strengths? What is at the top? Like, what is that one thing you are amazing at? And really honing in on it and thinking about giving you the space to really think about if I do calendar management, okay, what do I do about calendar management that might be different? Is it the color coding? Is it adding FAQs next to the individual appointments? So that's internal information for the executive only. Like really dialing in on that one key thing so that you can start to, one, get that confidence of like, well, yeah, I actually am a little different and I want to celebrate that. You said something, not be all things for all people. We're super big on that here, super big on that here. And also knowing your audience. And you said something that is beautiful that I think is what also holds admins up from actually taking this journey of discovering their unique admin profession. If they aren't, showing all, hard on the sleeve, fully over expressive in communication, like I'm not being my authentic self. Would you walk up to someone in the grocery store and just start telling them your business? No. Would you smile and give them a piece of you that's hospitable and kind? Yes. So when we want to think about how much we share with others, it is specific to knowing your audience. Are you going to tell a brand new employee that you're having, a naughty kid that can't behave and follow direction at home kind of thing? No, you slowly start to share who you are. So in the part of branding, you said leading with purpose, the best version of yourself. I loved how you brought in your daughter, which is beautiful. I have two boys and I think about that a lot with them. Not be all things for all people, and then leaning into building out your suite of strengths. And then the biggest one, before we go to the next question, I've mentioned this a lot, but maybe not enough, and I'm excited to mention it here. You are a business of one as an admin. And as a business of one, you are creating a proposition to say, and you were kind of just mentioning it, right? Hey, if you need help on this project, I have a value, I have a strength in my suite of strengths to help you with that. If you're a business of one, you need to broadcast out what value you bring. Just like Nike wants to broadcast that they're the right shoe for your feet for X, Y, and Z. Just like a coffee shop, Starbucks, this is our value proposition to you. Come in, order something unique you can't order anywhere else, right? McDonald's and Starbucks both sell coffee. Why do we go to Starbucks? Because we order something unique versus just a medium black coffee with some creamer and sugar on the side. So I really want to hone in on the fact that you are a business of one. From conversation, any thoughts on all that? Sorry, any thoughts on all that?
No, I no, I think you thank you for repeating the things I said, because I forget them after I say them. So I thank
Happy
you
to be your
for
assistant while you're talking.
looping back around.
Yeah.
No, I agree with everything you said, and one thing as I was thinking about coming out of the branding course, and then also just thinking about like, where are my strengths and how can I think outside of, again, not that we keep cluing in on the calendar management, but those kind of things that we do on a daily basis. And for me, one area that I was really excited about and tapping into the market, which we can talk more about later, but is where in our network of admins is there a need, different types of needs or different types of wants or different things that people don't even know they want. And so I kind of made a
Right.
list of, okay, these are the strengths I have in my workplace. But then
Mm.
what are my strengths as a board director? What are my
Hmm.
strengths on a personal level as a friend? And then what are some strengths within my network and social media and everything that I want to lean into? And that was an area that I was really confused and trying to figure out. I do a lot of different things and I have been on a lot of podcasts and a lot of different, and it's like, who am I? Like what are the
Right.
things that I want to lean into? And one area that I realized that there was a need, or the people didn't even know they needed, was kind of the history of admins. And I think a
Hmm.
really good way for us to think about our roles and feeling confident in it is to also understand where it even came from, and
Yeah.
those behind us and those coming ahead of us, and those now. And so through that branding course I really leaned into what is something that I want to focus in on, and that's how I created my admins of influence blog, which is a
So
blog
fun.
about looking at the history of the administrative profession. And so all that
Hmm.
being said, as we think about our strengths in all different ways, this is just another facet that I've really thought about. Where is there a need, where is there a want, and how can I fill that? And this is something that I'm super passionate about, is talking about our profession and
Hmm.
looking back, and how can we use that as motivation to keep us moving forward.
My one of my favorite words, evolution. And
Hmm.
it came up right there as you were covering that history of it. And I did a little bit of research probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I'm now in my 8th year running exceptional admins, about like, wait, where did this start? Right. And IAAP, for those that don't know, please tell us what that stands for.
It's the International Association of Administrative Professionals.
Okay,
Yep.
which was
Mouthful.
founded as a secretary association in the
Hmm.
40s and 50s, and then they took it and made it to what she just described. But it started with men, then they all went off to war, and
Yep.
then here we are filling those seats, which is interesting. When I kind of pictured in my head someone doing filing,
Hmm.
I was like, how good is it? Anyway, I digress. So you had it really good there on talking about like the different pieces of you and how you get to share different pieces with different audiences. And so from conversations you've had, what challenges have you heard or seen where others face when they're looking to build and communicate one's brand, right? Their
Oh, I
brand,
mean, I think the number one thing is, where do I even start and
which
why
you
would
just
I want
covered.
to do it?
Exactly. Great tee up.
You
Yeah.
know, it's really, I don't have the time. I don't, I have kids at
Hmm.
home. I'm working on a degree. I'm, trying to earn my CAP certification. There's always, reasons why we don't think about prioritizing our personal brand. And I totally get it. I mean, I've got a lot going on my plate, but I still try to figure out, it's kind of like if you were to go to the grocery store, um, with a list or without a list, right? So
Yes.
I say this
Yes.
because you go
It's
to
a
the
great
store with a
example.
list and you know what you're getting, right? And it's easier to focus. You're not just roaming around. You may get one or two things that are off that list, but you're really like, you know what you're making for dinner. And I find for the most part that makes my life easier to have this list that I can look back on. It also helps with budgeting, right? If you go to
Yeah.
the store and you don't have a list and you're hungry, good luck. If you go to Target, you're gonna spend
True
$500.
story.
You
True
know,
story.
you're going to find three candles in your cart that were not, anywhere in
But they
the
smelled good. Yeah.
yeah, they smell delicious. And so all that being said, I think about this even from a personal branding aspect of, if you have at least a thought of a couple things that you're really, really good at that you can lean into, it really will help you. This is not something you have to focus on all the time. We have a lot of
Mm.
other stuff on our plate,
And it's always
but keeping it
evolving. Yes.
exactly always evolving. And I mean, who I was 10 years ago as an admin is nowhere near who I am today.
Hmm.
Um, for better or for worse. And so I think that, by understanding your strengths, just like going to the store with a list, and being prepared that, these are the three key things that I really can hone in on, within my network and within my social media and everything else, really just helps you. And so branding yourself can evolve over time. It's not something you just have to sit down and do in one day. It helps to take a course on it. It helps to read a book about it. But don't feel like the pressure that you have to leave, especially this podcast, and go, oh my gosh, now I have to have a full personal brand. But knowing your
Yeah.
strengths helps you and will guide you, just like going to the store with the grocery list.
And it starts with, and you just said it, right? So everyone who's like, where do I start? What do I do? And then you're overwhelmed and then you don't
Yep.
pursue. So I would like to soften the high ambition and energy that many of you are taking in and starting to build up. It's simple. And by the way, I have to be with starting with my course. However, yes, I'm biased. The course is great. So I would like to say that you could take it. We've got a code for those that are listening. It'll be in the show notes as well. It starts with, do I want to share what makes me a value add in a company a little bit differently than those that are near me? And it's not to, or I would say what it is it's really uplifting once you become kind of like Maslow's hierarchy, become in your own. And when you're in your own, you're in a place of, I know who I am. I know what I stand for. I know what this moment needs from me. Or, as we were talking about, I am not great at math, and Carissa isn't either. So if it's an accounting meeting, not going to speak up, totally going to listen, take notes, right? Knowing when to present what you have to offer. But like she said beautifully with the list, if you don't have it written down, if you don't have it becoming a part of your vocabulary and how you're presenting yourself, it becomes a pursuit that unfortunately either doesn't start or starts a little bit and then begins to fall apart because you're expecting your brain, which by the way, our brains are amazing. Write it down. Think about what it means. Again, the suite of strengths. What's that first top strength that you have? For Carissa, she's totally coming into her own as being known for someone about brand governance, which I love because I don't want to know anything about it, but I'll just send someone to Carissa or to her blog of admin influence to get in that information. Maybe one day she'll have a course, and I can help you with that if you want to launch that. But anyway, I think it's really great to also highlight it can start in micro steps. And the first step is excitement to want to take yourself on that journey that is ever evolving. As a retired admin, who I am today, also at 44 years old, is different than I even was 7.5 years ago when I was still an EA. And it's not to say I'm inauthentic now. I'm more connected to the authenticity of who I am as I get older each year. So I definitely want to highlight that.
And I'll just add one last thing here.
Please.
Also, knowing who you are in that way helps you to say no.
Oh,
It's
oh yeah, we
it's
could have a whole show on that. Okay,
yeah,
but keep going.
it's
Yeah.
really it's really easy to say yes to everything, especially if you're a people pleaser. Most admins are. I mean, that's why we get in this roles. We want to take care of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you know your strengths, like again, going back to the math thing, I will listen and I will try to assist, but I'm not volunteering for nothing with
Yeah.
that, and that's okay. And so I know that we have to kind of stay in our lane sometimes, and that's
Yeah.
okay too. And so just know that by figuring out your key strengths and by kind of leaning into that personal branding and how you want to bring yourself to the table, not only will it help you grow, but it will also help you determine what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
and that can be just as important as knowing what you do want to do.
absolutely. Knowing one's brand is important why is knowing one's brand important for sharing their career story on their resume? Which I do have a career story workshop for resume writing, but we're not going to talk about that here, but I might give 2 or 3 tips away from that. But I want to hear from you first, Carissa. Why do you think, especially since you've been, investing time and energy into your brand, why do you think it's important on the resume?
I mean, expectations. Um,
Good point.
I mean, that's part of it. It's being able to showcase who you are, the things you've accomplished, which especially for this type of role, sometimes that can be really hard. You know you're good
Totally.
at something, but there's the nervousness around sharing that information, because what if you aren't as good as you think you really are?
Yeah.
Or you don't want to show off, you don't want to seem like you're better than someone else. So that can be difficult. But also, as you're thinking about going into a new role, what do you want them to be able to expect from you? And a lot of that can be shown on a resume, and leaning into, if you're really good at event planning, obviously you don't want to have 20 bullets about event planning, but maybe
Right.
you have one or two that are really great and specific on, I've planned up to 200 events, in the last 2 years. And maybe this is how brought the company in from these events, or this, we went from 40 people at these events to 200 people. And I know it can be hard on a resume to really, you don't want to be too wordy, but leaning into some of these strengths that you have and how you word them is going to be important, because then people, as someone looks at the HR looks at your resume, they're going to go, oh wow, this is something that they're really feel passionate about and that they're really do well at. And so, that's going to be potentially something that there's an expectation there that you can do that role, and you can do it, and you
Mm-hmm.
have done it. And so don't cut yourself short, even if it's not within your normal role. If it's something you've been doing for an organization or even outside of an organization, don't be afraid to put it in your resume.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm I could talk about this literally for an entire hour, but I won't because we're talking about branding. I want to give 3 tips on this specifically to branding. And I want to talk about which I've mentioned a few times. Inside your resume, you have an opening summary, which I can tell you, having seen probably 9,000 resumes in the last 7.5 years, it's a regurgitation of what's below the bullets, where you've been 18 years of experience doing this for leaders, attention to detail, which, by the way, there's always one detail off. So please stop using that on your resume. That opening paragraph should be nothing of what's below. And I have a resume article on my website that covers this. The reason being is, if we are in a world where you have 8 to 10 seconds of someone's attention, you want them to read that opening summary, which, by the way, I have an opinion on cover letters. Don't do it, but some of you have to do it. In the opening summary, you want something so compelling that has nothing to do really with what's below, in that you want to have, this is how I add value. This is what I'll do in the first 30 days. Now you've created the hook where they have the opportunity to say, I want to hear more, AKA, I want to read more. Right below that opening summary, a lot of individuals put areas of expertise. Please steal this from me. Put suite of strengths. It's nothing else you've ever seen. They'll be like, well, what is that? Now you've earned another 5 seconds. Then they're looking at those bullets, which, by the way, there should be maximum 6, 2, 4, and 6, right? Or 3 and 3, just enough to whet the palate and to kind of be like, okay, this is interesting. Because now they're going to keep going. If you have a regurgitation, next piece of advice, specificity. And my example will be with the calendar. If you say calendar management, I love all of you, but you read like everyone else. So instead, say something along the lines of, I have handled up to 30 touch points a week for 4 executives. That specificity paints and illuminates an imagination of picture and imagery of, wow, Kelly did a lot. That's awesome. We have 3 executives that this role is for, or 2, and they're not that busy. This person's going to be able to handle a lot and do it well. So from a resume perspective, you have 8 to 10 seconds of their attention. The opening summary is something very different than anything below. Don't say area of expertise. Please put suite of strengths. And then that specificity with the example I gave with calendar management, get more specific. Okay. And I'll have in the show notes a link to the article on the Exceptional Admins website, which gives you more information about that as well. And I believe we have a guide to download. Any closing thoughts on the resume part, Carissa?
No, other than it feels very hard to write them, at least from my perspective. I'm going to be honest, struggling to write a resume,
Yeah.
and so another area that looking at making sure I grow my skill set, because we should all have the ability to do that. And even
Yeah.
if you're not looking for another job, having an up to
Mm,
date resume is important to have. You never know when you're going to need it, and if the worst thing you can do is wait until you need it and you're stressed out and you can't think, and maybe something
yeah.
happened that is now putting you in a position that you have to do this last minute, and you're not going to have the best version, one, of yourself, but two, of your resume and what you're
Yeah.
putting forward.
Yeah. And in such a competitive landscape for job searching, if your looks like all the others, and this is a huge behind the scenes. And let's say I had a call with Carissa this morning, And it was a flat interview, very, very low ambition, not excited, which she would be obviously the opposite of that. And then the resume that I'm looking at, because I'm looking at 20 to now approve and decide what I want to do with them. If that resume looks similar to the resume of Carissa, who I had a call with earlier, it is highly possible that that reviewer thinks, oh, they're going to kind of be the same. Then it cuts it out for you to be able to get a chance, which you have no control over this. So I don't want to put a lot of sadness into the air on the topic of resumes. But the way to get ahead of that is to know your brand, to articulate your story differently. And you make a huge point, Carissa. I can tell you from resumes that come over, they just blew off like 50% of the dust, typed in 12 bullets, which are all regurgitation of the job prior. And then they're looking for a job because they weren't ready. And you should
Yep.
look at your resume at least twice a year to update it for the things that are happening at work. You just had this accomplishment, I know a lot of people, I had this, that like accolades folder where you're just dropping and dragging emails like, oh, they said I'm amazing. They said I'm amazing. Oh, they said they really like the event. But having that time with the resume, because there is nothing worse than a resume experience, which I'd be in the corner in the fetal position, rocking back and forth if I had to do mine. I really would. But they're like, Kalani, you know how to do it now. But still, I would. It's like going to the dentist. It's like terrible for me. Don't wait till the last minute. That's kind of the closing comment on that. What do you think showcasing one's personal brand in the workplace? What does it look like, such as with that employee review?
That's hard in the aspect of, you know, think about how busy we are in a day to day
Yeah.
and how many people, especially in our roles, that we have to be at once, how many positions we have to fill, dealing with the different executives, and they have all different personalities. And I don't know about you, when you're dealing with multiple executives, you change a little bit between executives, how you have to
Mm-hmm.
present yourself, how they like to be talked to. That can be a lot. And I think that, a big thing is when you're talking about, listing out your accomplishments. I hate to go back to writing things down.
But no, but it's
But
important. Yeah.
it's important. And because here's the thing is, I have my review coming up in 2 weeks,
Okay.
and
Great.
I had to go back. I have a folder that I take notes, throughout the year on accomplishments. And reminder, these aren't just accomplishments that pertain to your daily job. Is there other things that maybe you've done or taken on across the organization? Like don't sell yourself short on the things, if you had to take a call, which I hope none of us are doing this. I am, but I hope no one else on this call is doing this. But you have to take a call at 7 o'clock at night from someone who's not your boss, who's checking in on something, needs you to do something for them, and you do it. Write it down. And do not
Yeah.
be afraid to come back to that and be like, listen, I know that this was 7 months ago, but I just want you to know, like, this is how much I care about this organization.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing for this organization. I took this call, I assisted this person with this issue. And this isn't the typical, I'm not looking to be called at 7 o'clock at night, but I did it. And so those are the kind of things that are also worth putting on there, because if you think about when a manager, if you look at them as a person, not just your manager, if they have 10 other people on the team that they have to review, they're just going through whatever you're giving them, and they're not going to remember what you did in February either. I
No.
mean, I
No.
mean, think about, if you had a super fabulous month of February and your review was in August, but then in July you maybe didn't have such a great July. I guarantee you that they're going to focus in a little more on that July, not necessarily because they are trying to be negative Nancy and they don't want to give you a promotion or whatever else, but because it just happened, right? It's more in their mind, more forward in their mind. And so if you think about writing these things down, what is it that you're doing across the organization as a whole?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, give an example. I serve on the IAAP Foundation Board of Directors, and I travel a lot for them. There's a lot of things we're doing, and there's pieces of that board that relay, right to what I do in my workplace, that are
Mm-hmm.
now being the same thing in the IAAP Foundation Board. And so being able to utilize that information and my knowledge, my skill set, and so I actually wrote down for my review, something that I did with the IAAP that stemmed from something I learned at work. That I was able to utilize outside of it that was successful. And again, they might be like, oh, but that's not a work thing. But it is, because I'm honing my skills and I'm able to now
To
know that I
bring
can
more
bring it
value.
back.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And I'm going to be 10 times better than I was before at it. And
Yeah.
so don't cut yourself short when it comes to your review, when it comes to how you come to work, whether that's on, virtually or in person.
Hmm.
Think about that, and how you're communicating with people. I think your personal brand bleeds into everything that you do, and you do not have to be perfect. You do not have to be on it
No,
all the
no, no,
time.
no, 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 no,
And I
no,
don't
no,
want to
no.
give that message that you do.
Yeah.
But when you do feel present and you do feel like you're giving the most of yourself, that's when you want to make sure you're capturing this stuff.
Yeah.
So that way you have almost a grace period if you aren't able to keep up at certain times of the year, that you have things to reflect on the successes.
For anyone who hasn't heard this before, this will be exciting new information. For my regular listeners, you've heard this before. Lowercase type A. And I say that because she just mentioned the perfectionist piece. It can be very much a slippery slope, especially here in the chat, because we have an audience. Like, how much do you share? How much do you not? And being a lowercase type A brings that grace, brings the patience needed. You also don't suffocate yourself and maybe those around you. And so lowercase a. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't turn up the dial, be an uppercase A with a significant amount of plus signs, right? As a business owner, I have to fully be a type A person with certain things. And so being type A with a lowercase a is going to give you that grace also when you're thinking about building your personal brand, being patient with yourself. And to the point that she just mentioned, yes, maybe July wasn't great. That's super close to the review time. They're going to want to point that out. And I know a lot of from the thousands of calls I've had, Alani, I only hear the negative. I'm like, well, can we celebrate that they want you to be better? Why do we have to see it as it's supposed to tear us down? And if we are constantly looking for positive accolades all the time, and when it doesn't happen, we've set ourselves up for disappointment. Whereas you should be celebrating you, especially with the accolades book or whatever.
But you also, and I don't
Tell
mean to
me.
cut you off. I just want to add,
Yeah.
it's really easy to become complacent when you're
Thank
being
you.
told you're great. And so,
Good
I
point.
mean, as much
Super great
as
point.
it feels great to hear all these great things, I actually would count it as a red flag if I went into a review and I had all, hundreds across the board. What
Great
that
point.
tells me is that they're not really paying that close of attention.
They are
'Cause I'm
not
not perfect.
attention to me.
um, you know,
Yeah.
and it also doesn't give you any room to grow. And so, yes, it's
Right.
really hard to hear feedback sometimes, and it really does depend how you're getting it from them, how you're receiving it. But don't discount the positives that they
Yeah.
highlight. And I've read somewhere, and don't quote me on this, but I think it says something like for every three positives, you can only hear like one negative or something like that, like, to
Oh.
counteract. Yeah, there's a
Mm.
statistic out there that talks about this, related to especially getting reviews and getting feedback from people, that it takes, three positive comments about yourself to be able to hear one potentially negative. And
Interesting.
for someone like myself who does take a lot of things personally, I've really had to remind myself, and a lot of people are going to be like, I can't believe you said this, but it is just a job. And
Right.
so, as
Right.
important as it is to succeed and be and do well, these people don't know everything that's going on with you, and there may be a reason, outside of work, that maybe you didn't succeed in that one area. And we do have to try to remember, our accomplishments, and don't get bogged down by those negative things. And if they do give you a negative thing, ask questions. Don't just take it. Don't just be like, okay. Ask questions. Well, okay, I understand you feel this way, but what is it that I can do better next time? Or could you come up with maybe three goals? Can we come up together with three goals of how I can show you that I can work through this for next year?
Mm.
The worst
Mm-hmm.
thing is to not ask questions, have to sit in that grief, because you
Oh.
may find out by asking questions, maybe there's a very particular reason they feel that way. And maybe they're misunderstood. Maybe it's a misunderstood situation, or maybe they are right. And then you have to take a good look at yourself and say, okay, well, let's work on maybe some steps that I can improve this. And none of that is a bad thing. We are all evolving.
Mm.
We
Mm.
are all morphing all
So
the time
true.
into new versions of ourselves. And maybe that even plays into your personal brand. So if
Which I
there's
was just
something
going to
that,
talk about. I'm writing a ton of notes.
yeah,
Yes.
and if there's something that maybe that you're a little weaker at, um you know start to figure out how to grow that. Can that be a personal goal for you, that maybe you now wrap that into your personal brand?
Yep.
Um and I'll give one last example. I've been told a lot of times, that I can be intimidating. And
Can't even
I
imagine. No.
and I
Although
and
I'm
but I
told that
do
a
I
lot too, so I can relate. Yeah.
and I want to be respectful of that, because I take that, and it used to really upset me, because
Yeah.
I will tell you why. I've tried really hard in my life. I know I can be really driven and goal oriented and kind of direct. But I have worked really hard to try to meet people where they're at. And I don't succeed
Mm.
at it all the time, but I have tried. And so when I hear that for the longest time, I would take it really, really personal. And I've tried to make it a personal goal of mine to look at this as like, okay, if they find me intimidating, what are some ways that maybe I can change that perception? But then to also say to myself, like, that's who I am.
Yeah.
And also
Yeah.
embrace it. And I always follow up with, well, I'm sorry you find me intimidating, but do you find me mean? Do you find me
That
aggressive?
bifurcation and separation is
Yeah,
huge.
because
Intimidation doesn't need to be in the category of mean. I'm right there with
correct.
you.
And a lot of them will look at me and say, "No, I've never found you mean. I've never heard, have you say anything rude or hurtful." And so part of me, and then I just have to say to myself, like, okay,
Yeah.
none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
And at least I'm not a mean person because for me, that is like if someone were to say to me that I think you're awful and mean and aggressive, that would be really detrimental for me because I've tried really hard not to. So all,
Yeah.
all being said, I think really taking that feedback and figuring out how you can process that and just flip it into a positive.
Which, by the way, all of that she just shared is a part of building your personal brand. And it came to a great thing that to many, so many tell me I'm intimidating as well. And I've just accepted it. And by the way, I'm not sorry about it because it's helping people think about themselves and like how do they want to find their own unique badassery, if that's what we want to call it or whatever. But why not like show up just a little bit stronger or build that confidence and then tie into the personal. So much of what you just said is totally about the personal branding building. And I'm going to look up and try to find that 3 positives to 1 negative because I want to include that in the show notes. And I want to point out that when you were talking about your review, really writing it down. I know we've said it a few times and it's not because we're older, but like literally writing it down. Yes, I guess you could say typing, but I want you to know based on the research that I've done, writing with a utensil has a higher recall to memory than typing. And so if you're actively writing different things, thank you, Kelly. You dropped in the notes the 3 things. Awesome. We'll have that in the chat. You dropped in the 3 positive to 1 negative.
By the
The
way, I'm so glad I didn't get that totally wrong. I didn't fully botch
Yay.
it.
Okay, good. You didn't botch it,
Yay.
which is good. The personal branding is huge in your review. Yes, if you're doing also something on the outside, you have an opportunity to say how that's adding. And by the way, if you want to tell your executive that you are focusing on building your personal brand, you have allowed for a unique space for conversation to give you the permission, which we're big on permission slips here, to say, hey, I mentioned to you earlier, I'm building my personal brand. You've given me constructive feedback. I want to know, to Carissa's suggestion, are there 1, 2, or 3 things that we can do so that I can build that up? Not correct, not make better, build that up, which is so huge. The language that we use, my last thought, that feedback loop. I'm not good enough. I'm just an admin. None of that serves you well. But a feedback loop could also be positive. I'm building my personal brand. I'm building my personal brand. How does this help my personal brand? How does this help my executive? I'm building my personal brand. Like creating this very positive feedback loop that is just inspiration for you to keep pushing forward, to be that next great version of yourself because we are constantly evolving. And this is a great segue right into like how we present ourselves on social media. What do you think, Carissa?
I mean, asking yourself, like, who do you want? What version of you do you want to bring to the table to
Yeah.
share?
Yep.
There's a lot of pieces of us that maybe are more vulnerable, don't have a lot of confidence in, and that's okay. You don't have to always bring that to the table. But again, come back to like, what is that 1 or 2 things that you have a lot of confidence in? So if you're someone who likes social media, I actually am not a big fan of social media. I don't have Facebook. People think I'm crazy,
I love
but
that.
I do have LinkedIn, and so what I've done is I've again looked at my time and said, how do I want to use my time most wisely? And for me, it may not be the same for everybody, but I've focused in on LinkedIn. And so for me, I've been building. I made this decision about a year ago I want to get to 5,000 followers, and I have a date in mind. And I know it's silly, and it's not about who do I want to impress. It's more of a personal goal for me, and I want to grow that in a unique way and an intimate way, not just from people being like, oh, I don't know who she is, but I guess I'll just follow her. I want people to go, oh, yeah, I know, I've heard about her. I want to read what she's putting out
Carissa's
there. I
going to
want to
offer
read
me
her.
something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Add value.
what am I going to offer that her them? And so I look at this as how, what version of me do I want to bring forward? And so a good example, if we go back to the admin of influence, I again found an area that we're not spending a lot of time focusing on, which is looking back and historical purposes of, where did this role evolve from? What are some awesome admins out there that we can highlight, that we can learn from their
Mm-hmm.
mistakes and their successes? And so I've really tried to lean into that version of me. And then another version is my board governance. I have a lot of experience with board governance, whether it be serving on a board, whether it be the admin of a board. I teach board governance classes. I'm really passionate about it. I don't know how many of you know this, but it's like 7 or something percent of admins are female, versus board, governance, whether you want to call them a board secretary or whatnot. It's like 20% women. And so there's this big gap. And so my
Wow.
goal, as I look at, trying to hit 5,000 people in the last year, I've grown by almost 1,500 followers. And my
Amazing.
goal is to continue to do that.
So if you're
And
listening to this, you'll find Carissa in the show notes so you can go follow her. Anyway, keep going.
yes, please. I also have it on the chat if you're on the call, in my link. So, it's something that I'm really passionate about. How can I lean into my strengths and teach others? Because part of this is about, for me, giving back and making sure that I am providing to the community, because I've received so much support and I
Yeah.
have grown a huge network and a lot of friends in this area. How can I give back to the community and make people feel supported? And
Yep.
so, that's part of that social media branding. What is it that you can bring to the table, even if it's once a month? So I only do my admin blog once a month. I decided one time a month I sit down, I write it, it goes out. And I partly a couple weeks ago was like, maybe I could do 2 a month. And I thought, you know what? No,
I put
we're
my hand up.
just,
I'm like, no.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is what you've decided. This
This
is
is
the
it.
time we
Yeah.
can put into it. And so,
Exactly.
personal branding is as much, putting your foot forward and doing it, as also controlling what you're putting out there, because you can get burnout really easily. And
Yeah.
there's no point in putting things out that you're not proud of, or that
Oh,
you don't think are going to
yeah.
bring value.
Yeah. I launched this show in November of 2019. And I knew I wanted biweekly release, even though others were doing weekly, because I'm like, what can I sustain with all the
Yeah.
other things that we're doing mission driven here, right? Mission is to really put out the information, the conversations, the wisdom, the thought provoking moments. And then it was like, I could get really wrapped up into this, especially if it's weekly, and then trying to find people, host them weekly, do it, and then keep the quality of the content high, because I'm not getting, to your beautiful point there, burnt out, which is really important.
And if I can just add,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not your time, and that's okay
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Like sometimes, there's dreams and goals that I have that I'm like, I want to go do it. And then I'm like, you know what? I got a
Mm,
12-year-old at home. I have a husband, I have dogs, I have a life, I have, work. And so, like, let's focus on one thing that's attainable,
yeah.
because it's really easy to get overwhelmed with that. And so, if you wanted to start a blog, great. You don't have to do it every month. You can do it once a year.
Hmm.
So whatever you're putting out there, again, going back to that, feeling confidence in yourself, feeling like you are proud of what you're doing. And really,
Mm,
if you have that feeling and that confidence, even if you get a negative review, even if you get some feedback that's not
yeah.
fabulous, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier to swallow than when you're
Hmm.
putting things out just to put it out, and you're already overwhelmed by it. Burnout can hit you a lot faster that way, and also feeling negative and feeling like you just don't want to or can't do it anymore.
There's something unbelievably amazing about really coming into your own when you have been faced with a 1-star review, negative feedback, and it doesn't bother you. And I say that here as a business owner. Someone left like a 1-star review on Google with no context. I'm like, this is BS. Give me context, whatever, fine, 1 star. And then I've had candidate screens, and Leah has those as well. And we have to be very careful if there's something about the call or the questions. I mean, I've gotten people responding back like, you're a terrible interviewer, you don't know what you're doing. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I can move on. It's something magnificent to really come into your own at some point in your career where negative feedback can literally roll off your back and you can keep moving forward. So I want to give that just as a piece of inspiration. It is available for anyone. And she's right. Carissa is right. Timing is everything. right? I'm in my 8th year, still doing the podcast. EAU's online now instead of in person, like just showing up to what the moment needs and the timing. And also, one last thing. I don't want you to lose your ambitious goals, but I don't want you to do them all at once because the quality of the work might be less than what you want, and if you're putting yourself, because the questions around that social media piece, what's an overlooked strategy some miss to showcase their personal brand, right? What opportunity is lost when this is overlooked? What do you think?
I mean, if you're looking to stand out, which not every one of us want to, but if you really want to have something unique, you got to do an inventory of what's already out there. And
Excellent.
so I did that. I looked at what, I'm sure someone else is going to come up with a blog or a podcast and it's going to be the history of admins. And that's great. And I
Yeah.
don't know if I would have been an inspiration for it or not, but I did notice that that was something that there's not a lot of. And
Yep.
so as you look at the network that's out there of our peers, and, it can be very overwhelming. I talked to a new admin a few months ago and they said, there's all these organizations, there's all these programs for admins, everything, the market's saturated with
It
options,
is. Yeah.
which is awesome though, because
Yeah.
what it tells me is that people care and people
Yeah.
want us to have opportunities for growth. I wish the market was saturated with amazing jobs where they were paying a
Yeah.
hundred
So do
thousand dollars
I.
with the right
Oh,
title,
tell me about it.
and
Yeah.
so it's a little I think backwards to a degree, but I also want to I encourage you to take inventory of what is out there, where are your strengths, and then see if there's an area that maybe isn't as well developed within our market. If you're looking to do something to stand out a little bit, I think that'd be the best place to start. Get on LinkedIn, look what's out there, and also partnering with people.
Yes. Like
I
we're
mean,
doing here.
people,
I love
yeah, you
it.
do not have to go at this alone. I had
Yeah.
someone email me the other day and said they wanted to talk about something that I did in a group chat. And I said, that's awesome. And I said, do you ever want to partner? And if I wouldn't have asked, they wouldn't have asked me. And I don't think it's because they
Right.
didn't want to. It's they just were like, didn't even think it would even be an option. And I
Sure.
was like, yeah, I was like, let's do it. And so don't forget to lean into, your network and don't have to feel like you have to go about this all on your own. So get
Yeah.
your ideas, find some people you trust, and then really lean into that and how can you build that?
Which is a great segue from the networking standpoint, kind of my second to last question. And then
Mhm.
we'll open it for Q&A. But and we've gone almost an hour, which is so great. And we can't cut any of it because it's fantastic. Talk to me about the networking. I love that you said, do a little bit of an inventory of audit, right? Audit your inventory, what's out there, because if someone's going to do the scroll on Carissa, they're going to start to build these. "Oh, I like what she's saying. Oh, that was interesting. Never thought of that." Right. And again, it's that personal branding. Because also, when you think about like who's the resource for X, you want to decide if you want to be the name for that or within the top 5 names for that. So tell us how the branding part does help with networking.
Um, I mean, it has a lot to do with it and people kind of knowing who you are and what you're good at. And so
Yeah.
again, we go back to like my board governance piece. I've been doing board governance now for like almost 6 years in a variety of different ways for different organizations. And so I have people who will email me and we have somebody on the call right now who said, hey, do you have any resources? And
Yeah.
yeah, I do. They're boring. There might be a good, nighttime read to help you fall asleep, but like they're going to help you. They're going to help you
Yeah.
learn about board governance. They're going to give you tips and tricks on taking minutes. And my biggest thing is like, how do we bridge that gap
Yeah.
between what people want to do, and how can we help them get there? And so if I can
Hmm.
help one person be a better board administrator or take better minutes, that's part of that whole thing. And so kind of who do you want to show, what part of you do you want to show up in
Yeah.
social media or
Yeah.
in your network? And it's totally okay if it's kind of the same thing as what somebody else does,
Hmm.
because then it's another opportunity to partner with people. It's
Right.
another opportunity to lean into your skill set and maybe have a group of you who can assist others. And so
Hmm.
I just think kind of honing into who you are, everything we've said already, and just kind of putting that forward on social media. And it might take a little more work for someone who's an introvert, but it is
Right.
possible. And there's
Right.
ways to do it, like through blogs. You're not really
Yes.
out there putting your face forward. You're writing it down in an article.
Yep.
There's a lot of different ways to do that, that don't have to be so front facing. It takes a little bit more work sometimes, but there is options to do that.
Yeah. And if you're in a role and there's some stagnation in your role, and this is kind of tied to networking, go out to LinkedIn and start looking for some inspiration. We often think that we need to have our employer keep feeding us so that we don't get bored. And I'm thinking, why can't we be responsible for where we're going, how we're adding value, how we're communicating that value? I would definitely say showing up and articulating in your network, specifically LinkedIn is what we're talking about, like what value you bring, what vision and ideas you bring that could inspire someone. So much of just even this conversation has a ton of inspiration attached to different answers that we've both been providing. Going into your network on LinkedIn, scrolling through hashtags, finding what people are saying, what people are asking, and also looking out for those that are big complainers that use LinkedIn and maybe staying away from that because you don't want that repost or that like to be in your feed. I don't know. It's a little bit of a bold statement there, but there is some negativity out there. And if you have liked all of those negativities or celebrated all those negativities and someone's scrolling through your profile and they see that, they're like, oh, not sure. Not sure. Maybe moving on to the next person. So networking is really great. And I think you bring up a good point, just kind of also in that overlooked part is doing an inventory, of what's out there. What do you want to say? What do you want to be known for? Which goes totally into the conversation here of personal branding. Closing thoughts for us, Carissa. Closing thoughts.
Well, and I want to be mindful of the people on the call. So, I came up with a quote a few years ago, and I've always leaned into it. And it's being kind and compassionate may not always be the easiest option, but it's always the bravest choice. And so,
It's
I think a
beautiful.
lot about that and how you can leverage your strengths, your abilities, your kindness, and how sometimes it doesn't always feel like it's an easy way, an easy road to go down. Because in reality, it can be a lot easier to be negative, and you're going to get a lot of more people on that boat with you sailing away into the sunset of negativity.
Mm,
Um, and you may only have one person on the island with you left thinking about the positive and the kindness of it all. But I promise you, it's always the better choice. And so
yeah.
as I think about social media, how can we really engage on a positive level? And by doing that, lifting up other admins and also the people who see it who aren't admins, because we want them to respect us and
Right.
respect our roles, and that we
Oh,
have an
yes.
obligation
Mm,
to lean into that and set the example. So
yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, trying to stay away from some of the negative that is out there because also, and we say this here, and this came from Dee Dee, who's amazing in the admin space. She's like, we got to think about the collective. So if we're all liking the negative posts or we're sharing our unique value add, we are helping create that influence and what I like to say, invisible influence to the world that doesn't quite understand how today in 2024 and beyond, we're adding value, creating change and promoting that evolution of we're here to do a lot more than what you think we can do. Carissa, this has been amazing. Does anybody have any questions? We're still recording. We've got an active chat section going here, which is really great. Raise the C for EA and Admin Collective. Love that. Yes. Hi, Erica. Kelly, thank you for that link earlier. We have sometimes fight the overcome those old stereotypes, which, by the way, okay, here's a comment from Kelly in the chat. We have to sometimes fight to overcome those old stereotypes. It starts with the admins. The admins create the sea of change. When you have a personal brand, when you're showing that value proposition, you're literally disrupting the history comprehension of admins by being different, being a current day and futuristic admin in how you show up. So, Kelly, you bring up a great point. We do have to constantly promote a new perception of EAs today, and it all starts with you, every single one of you, every single one of you. Kelly's got a question. You want to read it, or Carissa, you got a thought?
No, I was going to read it. How
Yeah.
would you suggest starting an inventory of your skills as an administrative professional in order to help determine where your niche is? Um,
Mm.
I just got a piece of paper. I actually got one of the legal, like the bigger sheets, and I kind
11
of
by
make column.
17
Yeah,
paper.
I'm like, there's a lot of things going to come out of me.
Smart,
Uh,
smart cookie. Yeah.
and really just made columns of, what am I good at? And then what am I not so great at? What is it I want to learn? and really kind of inventorying myself and being honest, which I think is the hardest part. And I did it over a couple of days.
Yeah.
And so don't be afraid to come back to it.
Yeah.
And then from there, kind of like figuring out, okay, so now maybe you have like top five goals, top five skills, and then okay, now we're going to go into social media and we're going to do an inventory there.
Right.
What are people already doing? What people in my network asking people, hey, what is it that you want to learn more about? Do they
Yeah.
fit any of that stuff, you know? And if you can't find anything that's a totally your own, that's okay too. I mean, lean into what you're great at, and eventually, you know, people, if they don't already see it, will continue will grow to see that, and will, you know, learn to, you know, respect you as a thought leader in that area.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. That was really fantastic, Carissa. Yes. And everyone that was in this chat, we're going to have a code for you if you want to take the personal branding course. Maybe do an inventory audit first so you have some more information, or do the course first and then do the inventory audit. And I love your quote there. That's so fantastic. And everyone, thank you so much. We have gone well over, which should not be new for many of those that join my shows and listen to the podcast. Everyone, this was fantastic. Carissa, I really adore you. I really do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was great.